And I often call it high functioning fear because it might not feel like fear. It might not feel like panic or feeling scared, but it might be high functioning. Fight, for example, would look like I just need to hunker on down. I need to get it done. It's that kind of hustle mentality. High functioning flight might look like strategic avoidance. High functioning freeze, I often say, doesn't look like nothing's happening. It looks like busyness. And the reason behind it is because if you're an animal in the wild, you play dead and you hope that the predator passes you by. But in the workplace, if you stay very still, that gets you noticed. And so freeze can look like there's a lot going on. It's like, I'm so busy dealing with all this stuff that, if I'm honest, feels safe. I haven't got time to deal with that thing that feels like a struggle or a challenge.
Right. Hello, everybody, and hello, Embracing Only family. We're so excited to have Grace Marshall here with us. I met Grace in June of last year at an after-hours event at a bar after a conference, and we started talking. And when Grace told me that she was the productivity ninja or was part of that whole ecosystem, I was like, oh my gosh, no way, tell me more. How are you so happy and glowing and smiling all the time? Because I had a manager, Grace, who actually got us all to read Productivity Ninja, made us all do the course, 800,000 times, and just missed the nuance of it all, which you captured in your second book, which is Struggle, right? And I think it's so critical. So for folks listening in, go buy both these books. We'll drop links in the show notes as well, but Struggle and How to Be Really Productive by Grace Marshall, who is not your typical productivity expert. So she's self-proclaimed, naturally disorganized chief encourager, and she helps people rethink productivity, not as a relentless race to do more, but as a way to work smarter with heart. And she's an award-winning author, speaker, and as I shared, productivity ninja at Think Productive. And she's coached thousands from being overwhelmed, especially CEOs, leaders, to learning how to get things done without burning out in the process. And for all of us working through the crazy news cycle right now, working through just life in general, we might all feel like, where do I find the joy? Where do I find the clarity? Where do I find the boundaries to truly be effective? And that's where Grace's book, Struggle, really comes into play, where she flips our understanding of how hard times reveal life's messiest moments and how they can spark growth, creativity, and resilience. She's been featured in The Guardian, Forbes, and on BBC Radio. And I can just tell you from my one conversation with her at that bar, it was refreshingly humorous and deeply practical. And so today, she's here to share how we can redefine success on our own terms. So we've all understood that assignment. Go buy those two books. And Grace, welcome to the Embracing Only podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And Archita, can you just come around with me and just introduce me wherever I go? I love that introduction.
Done. You know what? I hear this so often from every one of our guests that join us. I think that should be something I should turn into a real thing.
Yeah, I think that's one of your superpowers. Absolutely.
It's one of my superpowers. I love to amplify people. I just love, and you've just done so many amazing things. And so we're so excited to have you here, Grace.
Absolute pleasure.
Awesome. So we're going to dig right into things. So just as we were getting ready to hit play, Olivia shared something very vulnerable as she's going through many changes. I recently went through many changes of my own. And one of the biggest changes I went through a couple of years ago was becoming a corporate dropout. So decided to leave the corporate world behind and step into the world of entrepreneurship, etc. And so that part of change, one of the biggest things I had to unlearn is, what does it mean to be productive? Because I was defined by productivity being meeting and exceeding expectations that were defined in my success card, my objectives, etc. But now as an entrepreneur, I had to really redefine what it looks like. And Grace, you talk about how productivity isn't just about getting stuff done, but it's about that whole life experiences. And to an addict of ticking and checking boxes, can you elaborate a little bit more about what does this look like for folks who are, I'm confident, 99% of our audience here are obsessive checklist ticker offers.
Me too. It feels good to be able to tick things off a list. And the science behind it is we get a dopamine hit. You get a dopamine hit when you can cross something off a list, when you can tick something off. It makes you feel good and you want more. And so that kind of productivity can be really seductive because you look for those quick wins. You look for those things that you can tick off and it becomes addictive. It becomes seductive. It can be really useful sometimes. If you have got a load of things to check off, it can be great at creating pace and energy and momentum. But if you're checking off all the wrong things, it sends you round in circles. It sends you off on a tangent. I loved what you described there, Atita, like that difference when you go from the corporate world to entrepreneurial world, all of a sudden you're deciding what success looks like. And success might not look like ticking a whole load of things off that are known and defined. Success for you might look like sitting with something very undefined to go, what does this look like right now? What do I want to do? What does success look like? What is my ideal client? How do I want to approach the next 3 months? And because you haven't got somebody else defining those things for you, the easy to tick off things might take you in completely the opposite direction to where you actually want to go.
I want to kind of solidify this in my brain cells right now, is that my natural easy to tick off things would be speak to 10 people, close 2 people, sign 1 client. And that might take me down a whole other rabbit hole versus take time to define what is it that I love to do? What would I get paid to do that I would love to get paid to do within this life that I've defined for myself? And then what does that client look like? Who might I be able to talk to be able to get access to such a client, etc.? So, you talk about curiosity in a lot of the keynotes that you do as well, is approaching it with a very different lens of like almost control, like letting go of the control of those actions we're so used to taking that define being productive to going through like I should not say meandering, but meandering curiosity to explore a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because if you're innovating, if you're doing any kind of innovation, you've got to have space to explore. Otherwise, you're only going to find the familiar things. So, and inventors know that. Inventors, if your job is to invent things, know that you need to try lots of things and there'll be lots of things that fail. That success doesn't look like success. In most of it, actually. Most of the time, it looks like frustration. It looks like dead ends. It looks like strange mutations. But then something happens that catches your imagination. You go, that's the thing. And it's almost like having that inventor's mindset, but just for the everyday, for your work. So it doesn't look like I'm ticking all these things off. It doesn't look like the glory things that I can post on social media, but almost saying to yourself, no, this is the foundation that I'm digging and this matters. And almost having that trust in yourself that like when it feels like everyone in the world is just like going a million miles an hour and achieving all these things, you're not playing that game. You're playing your own game. You're defining your own game first. And it's okay for you to go at your own pace because you're doing something important here.
So I think this point is so important. And not only is it relevant, I think, in the pivot to outside of corporate to entrepreneurialism, but a lot of the ladies that I talk to within the corporate ecosphere, as we're talking about designing their careers, creating a career path that's efficient, that's focused, we start right here. Grace. We start with what do you want, right? Because a lot of times I think, as I'm noodling on what you're saying here, women will take on those passion projects that could be in direct opposition to where you actually want to go at work, right? You keep saying yes, you keep taking on more, and those activities that are burning you out, that are sucking up your bandwidth, are misaligned from where you actually want to go in your careers. And so it ends up being this busy work. So I think you're spot on with taking that strategic pause, one, to explore right before you make a decision, and then make a decision and be very careful about being aligned to it. All your actions should be aligned to it.
Yeah.
So I have a second follow-up question for you here. And this one's a little bit personal to me, as Archita mentioned. I'm definitely in a season where the volume of things that need to get done, holy cow, and that prioritization is becoming important. But you said something, and I believe you said this in your book, that productivity isn't just about getting stuff done. It's about the whole work-life experience. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what you meant there?
Yeah. So for me, I think when I said that, what I was noticing was the productivity conversation. So we start off talking about efficiency. But as we've already said, if you're just doing a whole load of things efficient, but you're doing the wrong things, that's not productive. And so productivity then we start to talk about effectiveness. And I think Peter Drucker does that. He talks a lot about doing the effective things rather than just doing things efficiently. Even as we talked about that, I thought that's not the whole story. So for me, the experience is about doing good work in a way that does you good, as well as the good that you're doing out there in the world. So it's about the whole work-life rhythm, the experience. Am I actually enjoying this process as well as being able to create that output that is doing good out there? And that's partly because when it's enjoyable, it's sustainable and we're not going to be burning out. But also just, I think, from a human experience, we spend so much time at work. Let's do work in a way that strengthens us. Our strengths should be the things that strengthen us, not the things that deplete us. And I think to your point, Olivia, about if you're someone exploring, like, where do I want to go in my career, or maybe even making a career pivot, sometimes the things that other people know you're really good for are the things you actually want to stop doing. Yeah, it's like, I can do that, and I know I can do a good job, but actually that's not doing me any good. Maybe I've changed. Maybe I want to be exploring. Maybe there's a part of me that hasn't been allowed to breathe, let alone shine. And I want to dig into that. Yeah, that's what's getting my passion and my purpose going right now. And I want to dig into that. And that might not look super productive, especially in the early days when I'm starting out, when it's new. And so that experience might feel like wrangling. It might feel like lots of false starts. But again, if you bring it back to it's the purpose behind that and staying true to that, that experience might then lead to that growth.
What you said, Grace, about essentially going down to what got you here won't get you there kind of thing, but we'd have a first 10 years or first decade of our working career where we're continuously given carrots towards behavior that companies want and believe is productive. And then we just take those carrots and we're like, oh, it's bringing meaning to my life. Oh, I'm being productive. This is amazing. This is awesome. And check, check, star, star, star. And invariably, after a decade, 15 years in, you start recognizing, like, girlfriend, like, I have never stopped and asked myself the question that Olivia mentioned earlier: what is it that I want? And then what you just reiterated, Grace, which is, what is it that I want, but that is not driven by what someone else believed to be effective, to be the best use of my talents, but truly is the best use of my talents. So there are many of our listeners, Grace, that are on this call here who are in that space of feeling like they're in survival mode. And one of the things you talk a lot about is, what would it look like to thrive, to do your best work and have fun doing it? How can you help someone, whether it's your framework that you've shared or a practice that you'd share with folks, to help them elevate their day from being merely busy to be genuinely fulfilling towards that meaning and purpose that you mentioned?
Yeah, God, so much in there to unpack. One of the little sort of language tips that I really like is the difference between I've got to and I get to. So if you feel like you're going through a whole load of things, I've got to do this, in fact, Olivia, I think you've probably had that right now. Here are all the things I've got to get done in order to be able to move, and all the things I've got to get done. And when we're in that space of I've got to, we put ourselves in that kind of energy of like survival mode, as you say, Arjita. So that kind of has to happen. Otherwise, it's all going to fall apart. And yet, if you swap your language for I get to, it reminds you to look for that purpose, that fulfillment, that reason why, or even just the thing that I enjoy doing. If I'm dashing off on a train, and I'm running from one meeting to another, and I'm off to meet a friend for coffee, I'm like, I've got to get there in time. I've got to get this train, blah, blah, blah. Hang on a minute. I get to meet my friend for coffee. If that's the thing I enjoy doing, it just reminds us this is what we get to. And it reminds us to look for this is an opportunity. And you can use it for things like I do it for exercise and training. I get to go for a run. I get to do these squats and work on my legs or work on my glutes. And some of it is like, I know I'm tricking myself, but it works. But sometimes it does help you just to remind you, like, what is it that I get to do here? And actually, is it the thing that I would still choose? Or am I just doing it because I've told myself I've got to?
I love that, Grace. And I feel like I've heard the concept pitched in a different way. Similarly, I want to say they're called glimmers. Archita, wave me off if I'm remembering incorrectly. But it's like you look for these glimmers in your day, right? Like just these small moments where you're getting some joy, you're getting some happiness. And I couple that theory with Archita's counsel of write it down. So you can start to see the patterns in your own behavior of what small things during the day will bring you some joy. I love that concept because you're right. With the move that's happening behind me, it's certainly stressful, but it's absolutely an I get to, So I should stop lamenting about these boxes and the chaos at my house and and remind myself I get to.
Yeah, and it works even for things that you haven't chosen. So you imagine you have to have a really difficult conversation with a team member. And if it was up to you, you wouldn't want to have that conversation, or you feel like, oh, I shouldn't have to. But it's, you know what, I get to do this in a way that honors this person or honors our relationship. Or I get to have this conversation where I'm not sure where it's going to go, but we get to find out. And again, it points you towards curiosity rather than fear. And when we talk about survival mode, often is a form of fear. And I often call it high functioning fear because it might not feel like fear. It might not feel like panic or feeling scared, but it might be high functioning fight, for example, would look like I just need to hunker on down. I need to get it done. It's that kind of hustle mentality. High functioning flight might look like strategic avoidance. High functioning freeze, I often say, doesn't look like nothing's happening. It looks like busyness. And the reason behind it is because if you're an animal in the wild, you play dead and you hope that the predator passes you by. But in the workplace, if you stay very still, that gets you noticed. And so freeze can look like there's a lot going on. It's like, I'm so busy dealing with all this stuff that, if I'm honest, feels safe. I haven't got time to deal with that thing that feels like a struggle or a challenge. So that's high functioning freeze. And then your fourth fear response is fawn, which is basically if you imagine an animal in the wild turning around to its predator saying, please don't eat me, I'll be your friend. That's the fawn response. So that's the people pleasing, the accommodating, the saying yes when you know you should have said no.
I feel like you just rolled a grenade at both of us. No, you're so right. I think the way you just broke down corporate level or high functioning levels of fear, there's so many things that you said that I was like, oh my God, I see that. I do that. I recognize that in others. And we don't like to call it high functioning fear. We're thinking we're operating above the fear spectrum, but we've just gotten so comfortable with it. It's still fear, but we've just gotten so comfortable. We've developed these, to your point, high functioning mechanisms for how to deploy them. But at the end of the day, still fear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It reminds me, Olivia, and like Grace, about we talk to a lot of women on our podcast, and I've shared my experience of when there's something that's happening at work that's extremely uncomfortable, like a case of like workplace bullying or harassment, or even just like microaggressions at work or whatever it might be. And you notice immediately most people, we look at all of the data at Speak Out Revolution, etc. as well, most people immediately go into, let me try to be more, I'm putting it in quotations, like productive, more effective, to prove that I am not worthy of all these things that are coming at me. But it is, it's such an interesting kind of viewpoint there is freeze in the workplace cannot be standing still, because you can see that. It's so clear. So humans naturally will not just sit still and be like, oh, I'm not going to do much with it. But they go into this overdrive. So something for so many of the women on here to consider, that if you are experiencing an uncomfortable situation or whatever, like a situation across the spectrum, how do you sit with understanding what is the root cause of it versus trying to do a bunch of doing in order to not deal with the root cause of what's causing that discomfort itself? And that kind of brings me to this conversation of your second book, which is Struggle, right? There's this thing I heard, I was listening to you share in one of the talks, and you said, in chemistry, we learned that a catalyst is essentially an irritant. And that just was like, oh my God, a catalyst is essentially an irritant. And usually when we think about workplace irritants, we think about like just whatever, like life irritants, etc. They're an opportunity for us to catalyze something and do something. So for folks who are navigating that, what you have this 3-step framework or however you want to lead us and guide us down this, what is it that they should be doing in order to recognize that irritant and then catalyze action towards?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that we tend to do when we hit struggle is we get this tunnel vision. And we even talk about seeing light at the end of the tunnel as a sign of hope, right? So we look for that light at the end of the tunnel. We look for the exits. We look for how do I get rid of this irritant, get away from it, or fix it, or overcome it. But all of those are essentially fear responses. And so one of the things I often say is, what if we were to shine a light in the middle of the tunnel? What might we see instead? And in order to shine that light in the middle of the tunnel, we first need to stay in the tunnel long enough to be able to turn the light on and not be looking for those exits. So I share like a 3-step framework that I call my 3 shifts. And that's because when I talk about struggle in the corporate world, I talk about life's shiftier moments. That's not the actual word in the book, but I like to keep the language clean. So,
you can say life's shittier moments like this.
Yeah, exactly. So the framework is like your 3 shits or your 3 shifts, whichever way you want to go. Yeah. So if you're sharing it with some kids, like you might want to go for the shifts. So the first is O shift. It's just recognizing I'm in a tunnel, I'm in a struggle, or even just recognizing I'm in fear mode and just noticing. And that noticing and naming helps us to pause long enough that we're not running through, rushing through, we just stay still in that tunnel. And that allows us then to go, what's actually going on here? Which is the second shift. Second shift is, what is the shift? It's what is going on here. It's where we activate curiosity in the face of fear. It's where we turn the light on in the middle of the tunnel and go, what does that look like? And what is it actually? And so that's where you get really curious. And I often talk about curiosity as the antidote to fear, because fear will tell you danger, keep out, get away from this. Whereas curiosity goes, oh, that's interesting. Let's take a closer look. And so your attention completely changes when you look at something with curiosity. You're not trying to get rid of it or fix it. You're just trying to understand it. You're trying to see it from different angles. You're just getting playful and exploring. And that's where you're much more likely to spot the opportunities or the innovation or the root cause. Or even if you're in a conflict situation, that's what helps you to really connect and go, okay, what looks like anger might actually be pain. What feels like conflict could be confusion. You lean into your empathy with curiosity. You lean into that compassion. You lean into creativity. So like curiosity is like this kind of gateway into all the human skills, all the human things that we do really well that gets shut down when we're in fear mode. Because if you're in fear mode, you don't want to see everything. You just want to see like, quick, what's the weak spot in my enemy? How do I defeat this? Or what's the escape route? How do I get out of here? So we start off with those shifts, then we get to what is the shift. And then the third shift is holy shift. So it's that revelation, that opportunity, that discovery that we find when we allow ourselves to approach the struggle with curiosity. Now, sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes it takes some time, but always we'll get there. And it's that treasure that we find in the life shittier moments, basically. Because when we hit struggle, it's often a defiance of expectation. We didn't choose it. We didn't think we'd end up here. But in that defiance of expectation can be all sorts of magic that can be discovered if we allow ourselves to pay attention. And so that's where that treasure comes from.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Cream. If you are a corporate girly and you are struggling, you're feeling stuck, maybe you're feeling underpaid, overqualified, you're struggling with your boss, or bigger yet, you're even trying to clearly articulate what it is that you want from your corporate career, I am the coach for you. So if you're ambitious and you've got goals to accomplish and you want to accomplish them quickly, check out my website, oliviacream.com. I would love to help you reach your goals.
Hi, everybody. I'm Archita Fritz, your other host of the Embracing Only podcast. If you're ready to leave corporate or you've changed a couple of corporate jobs and want to start a profitable side brilliance. You've made the decision, but you feel unsure of the next steps. Here's how I can help you. I can guide you through a successful transition to entrepreneurship to help turn those ideas into profit. So reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit me on architafritz.com to accelerate your empowered transitions. Now, back to the episode.
It's such a beautiful way, I think, to frame up essentially taking your power back. That's essentially what you're doing, right? This is a framework for how you snatch that power back. And I'm thinking about some of the clients that I've worked with that could so desperately use your work. And I have to ask you this question. Now, suppose you have someone who recognizes that they're in the shift, but is more afraid of dealing with the shift than sitting with it, if it makes sense. So someone's like, okay, this situation is uncomfortable for me, but it may require that I have an uncomfortable conversation with my boss, with HR, with whoever about what's happening around me. And they would rather sit in it than have the conversation. What would you say to that person?
Sometimes it's like a cost benefit thing. It's what's the pain? What's the payoff? And I think often what we do is we think it's a psychological thing. We underplay the pain when it's familiar. It's like better the devil you know, right? I know it. It's horrible. I hate it. I'll moan about it, but I don't want to do anything about it because what happens if I open that box? And that's the pain that's unknown. And I think sometimes what I find helpful is talking it through. So maybe I find someone who's trusted and talk it through, or writing it down and exploring. So one of my friends, Alison Jones, who's also my publisher, she wrote a book called Exploratory Writing. And she does these 6-minute writing sprints where you basically get a piece of paper, pencil, and you just write at the speed of thought. And you put the timer on for 6 minutes. And you start off with, what is this costing me? And you just write, like you're not censoring anything. And then maybe you do another one of going, what does it cost me to stay here? Or what does it cost me to do something? Why am I not doing something? Why am I scared of doing something? And maybe that whole recognizing the fear. So maybe fear is creating that sense of, I'm just going to stay put. Yeah, so maybe that's the freeze. And so what is that fear saying? And how true is that? Because fear will tell us all sorts of lies to keep us where we're at. And so even just like sometimes that act of writing it out or speaking it out to someone, you hear yourself saying something, you see yourself writing something, you're like, I know that's not true, but that is totally what fear is telling me right now.
Yes, I see so much value in that. I see so much value in writing it down. I also see this so much with the question you asked, Olivia. I remember talking to so many people when I was leaving my first corporate job, and they're like, oh my God, I've experienced all of these things, but I'm okay. Because they're just like, I'm like, no, you're not okay. You're continuously experiencing it. Like it's that what you mentioned, Grace, the familiar pain. They're happy with the familiar pain because they know what to expect. They know that when this cycle repeats itself, this is the pain I'm going to expect. Okay, good, sounds good, pain I'm going to expect. But this idea of what it's true vulnerability is the true willingness to step into that vulnerability with yourself, not with other people that we think, because we think that, by opening up that box, we are going to have to share our pain. But no, it's our own internal vulnerability that feels so scary because we have never experienced that before. And it's terrifying. I wanted to share a story here about the stepping into this fear with curiosity. I was 22 or 23 or something. I can't remember, like a very young human being. And I was in a meeting and I was representing Rest of World. That was my title, Associate Product Manager, Rest of World. Okay. And so this is a billion dollar company. And I'm like this tiny little inconsequential human that is not representing the US, which was the world. I was representing the rest of the world. And we're getting ready to launch products to market. And I'm sitting there and listening to the project manager and the leader and the program director. They're talking about the product launch, but everything is just, we're going to be ready for the US state. So I wait towards the end of the conversation. I'm just like, hey, I might have missed this, but do we have a separate meeting or are we going to talk through what is the project launch for the rest of the world? The program director looks at me like I'm crazy. And mind you, these products are being sold already in the rest of the world. So we need to have a plan for the rest of the world. And he said, I'll talk to you later in my office, Archita. I was like, okay, whatever, dude. And so we go into his office with my manager at that time. And this guy berates me. Imagine this. He's ex-military. He stands up. He's just like yelling at me. The audacity for you to speak up and talk and ask that question, what do you think? Blah, blah, blue, blue, all of this crap. My manager's just sitting there. So I literally look at my manager. It was one of the few times very early in my career, I had a lot of guts to just speak up. And I was like, are you going to say something? And he's like, no, I think this is just a conversation between the two of you. I'm like, then why are you in the room?
Oh, wow.
This room. I didn't say anything. So I was like, this is when I got very emotional. And I was like, okay, listen, this is my job. My job in that meeting is to represent my constituents, which are the people who represent the rest of the bloody world. And so eventually the president of the division got involved, and then they finally had to make a plan because he asked the same question a week later and they didn't have a plan of action, blah, blah. But that was an extremely scary situation because I was not sure what's going to happen. My manager later did whatever he did, but I was like, how do I lean into this? Because this guy was unintelligent, if that's even a word, emotional moment, an emotionally unintelligent moment, or whatever that word is. And so I scheduled one-on-ones with him every other week because I was like, I literally was like, I walked out of that room. I'm like, I never want to be in this room with this person. He sucks. He's the worst. Don't get me anywhere near him. I like not look at him. I'll walk by his office, not even look at his office. And then I was just like, girlfriend, slow down. And I was just like, why are you so damn uncomfortable with this human? Schedule time with him. And I literally scheduled one-on-ones with him every other week until I moved on from that role and everything else. And our relationship changed because I understood, he understood. I still didn't respect the way in which he showed up that day, and a little later on, and we can discuss that. But the curiosity let me, if I didn't know what it was going to be like, the guy could have rejected my one-on-ones and been like, oh, she's just trying to be all friendly or whatever. But you don't know. And it's not because some of my colleagues at that time were like, my God, you're so brave. It's not about being brave even, right? It's about that curiosity that I now have language to describe.
I love that. One of the things I picked up from that conversation is one thing that gave you courage in that space was your role. You were like, actually, I'm not just here because it's me. I'm here representing the rest of the world. And so that gave you that purpose, that courage to go, no, I need to dig in here. I need to speak my mind. It's because my job is not about pleasing you. My job is about serving these people. That's powerful stuff when you're facing fear. It's like recognizing, hang on, what is the fight for actually? Yeah, what is the cause? Yeah, what is the point of this? And it's not me against you. It's me serving these people. And that's why I need to speak up here. And then the second thing I love is the way that you went, actually, okay, you made a point that when things are uncertain, yeah, we hate that. And so much so that there are studies that suggest that we would rather give ourselves electric shocks than deal with, face the thing that's uncertain. So what you did there was let me get to know this uncertainty. Let me schedule time with this person so I can get to know this person and find out and get to know them better, and they can get to know me better. And I can't remember who said it, but I love it that, that people are really hard to hate up close. So the more that you get to know someone, the more you connect as human beings. And it's a vulnerable thing because you then have to you have to brace that thing of that was my combatant. That was my enemy, to now going, actually, this is someone I'm going to try and get to know.
I don't know, Grace, I have some enemy combatants at work that I don't know.
I know. I'm not sure I have the energy to do all of those. Sometimes it's worth it.
But you talk about this fake positivity too, though, because that's also something that's critical, right? Because it's not about just being positive about, hey, let's get over this. Let's learn to work with this person. Let's work through the struggle. Let's stay positive at all costs, or any of that nonsense, because there are real dangers to that fake positivity. So you talk about, and I hate to use this word because it's almost a swear word, but I'm going to use it, authenticity. Because to me, it's okay. There are so many layers to what this could look like for a human, depending on the intersections they represent showing up at work. But how does one embrace like that more honest, nuanced outlook, one that allows for that frustration, that vulnerability, that truth, and that actually helps us emerge stronger and more, I'll use your word, like productive versus that fake positivity?
Yeah, for sure. I think the question of what is true here is a really good question to ask. If you're in that situation where you're being faced and you've been triggered and all the fear is happening, asking yourself what is true here helps you to separate your facts from your fears and your feelings. And all those three things are legitimate. Just because something's a feeling doesn't mean it's not real. It's very real. But what might be untrue is the meaning that we ascribe to that feeling. It's like that thing of, I feel like you're attacking me, therefore you must be attacking me. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Actually, that's not within my knowledge. So being able to separate between facts, fears, and feelings is helpful, because then you can attend to all of them, but attend to them in different ways. And then that asking what's true of them. And in certain situations, when you're having your one-to-ones, you can be testing out and you can be asking them that question. You might have certain situations where you're like, I'm reading this as this. Is that what you mean by that? And so you can test out what's true. But then there might be other times when you go, you know what? I don't know what's true. It could be this, it could be that. But what I do know is I need to put this boundary in place. So maybe it's, I don't know what's true in terms of the intentions behind that behavior, but the impact of that behavior is this. So this is what I need to tackle. I need to tackle that behavior. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Honestly, I'm taking notes over here because I think you just said something so brilliant that we don't normally think about. And I like to consider myself a pretty self-aware human. But I think when you said asking yourself, what is true here, is such an important question. And I tend to ask clients to ask themselves, how do you know that, when they're telling themselves a story? But I feel like what is true here is such a better variation of that, because it really forces you into validating what you think. And sometimes when you're moving so quickly, and I know Archita and I as cancers, oh God, can we tell ourselves some stories? We have the best, most elaborate stories that we tell ourselves. And sometimes our brains get so far ahead of us that like this story has concocted and we wholeheartedly believe it. But that one question can really shake the foundation of that entire, to use your word, shitty house we built around ourselves. To stop and say to ourselves, what is true here is so powerful. I don't know how you feel, Archita, but I think that's like mind blowing for me.
I literally wrote it down because I was in 3 board meetings over the last 2 weeks. In 2, I was presenting, and in 1, I was on the other side. And the first board meeting, I came out thumping my chest, like, yeah, with all the masculine energy you can possibly envision of Mark Zuckerberg and all of those greats. I'm joking. And I was like, dang, like I figured this out. I know how to do this. And in the last board meeting when I presented, I was like, what the heck? That was terrible, right? And I created this elaborate damn story in my head that I would sit with as I was falling asleep, which is so irrelevant, so freaking irrelevant. And the genesis of all of that is, what is true here? No one said anything. No one even told me like anything. It's just my very random expectation of how I thought the conversation should have gone, how they chose to maybe respond. It's this nonsense of narratives that we keep creating for ourselves, which kind of goes through like that initial conversation we were having around redefining what does success look like for you in any given moment, and defining it for yourself, and then having a real honest conversation with yourself of, if I didn't define this to be successful, even if I've defined this to be successful, what is it rooted in?
Yeah, absolutely. Your example, Chida, reminds me of once when I did a talk for a group of people and one of my friends was in the audience. And I kept seeing her face and I kept thinking, have I done something to upset her here? Have I just said something to like really offend her? Because she just looked so unimpressed. And it just kept playing on my head, through my mind. And right at the end, afterwards, she came up to me and she looked at me like real deadpan face and went, that was really good. What? I realized, that's her concentrating face. And like you, there's so many stories we can make up in our heads. And that's why that whole, just anything that makes you stop and go, oh, everything I've just made up in my head is just one story, one big story. And when you can flip that around, you suddenly go, oh my goodness, there's so much else going on here. I'll give you an example from my personal life. And you've probably read this in the book. There's a bit in the book where I talk about a moment that I had in the marriage counselor's office. Where we were recounting, I can't even remember what argument it was, but we were recounting this argument, and the marriage counselor says to my husband, oh, that sounds a lot like panic. And I was like, that's not panic. Listen to him. He's articulate, he's cold, he's calculated. That is not panic. And he turns around and goes, yeah, that's exactly how I'm feeling. I was like, what? And that's when this idea of high functioning fear came to me. It's like, oh, if that's what a high-functioning panic attack looks like, everything changes. Because there I am trying to justify, trying to argue, trying to explain, all of these things that you do where if someone's having a panic attack, you don't do that. It's a bit like toddlers. If they're having a tantrum about socks, you don't argue the merits of socks. You realize they're tired or they're hungry, and you tend to those needs first. And so when I started looking at all of these situations, go, oh, if that's what a panic attack looks like for him, okay, what is it that he needs? And so she asked this follow-up question to him to go, what helps you to feel safe if you're panicking? And for him, it's physical touch. So it's like a hug or a hand on your shoulder. And that's the last thing that's on my mind if I'm in the middle of an argument where I'm like having to defend myself, right? But if this is like somebody I love, who is having a panic attack, that's the first thing I'd go to, is give him a hug. Everything shifts when we're able to go, oh, actually, everything was based on me seeing this as an argument, where I'm having to defend myself. But if it's not, what if it's not? What if it's panic?
What a beautiful shift.
It's so beautiful. Olivia, can I share one thing? I know we got to come to a close here. You shared something that's so first of all, everybody, please go read the book, because there are so many beautiful nuggets like this that will help you reframe and it's language. It's the language we use to speak to ourselves that really matters at the end of the day, because those are the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we believe for ourselves, etc. But if I were to take that example, put it in the corporate world, because the higher you get in your role, you get less feedback on a daily basis. When you're younger, come out of a meeting, a manager will send you a note, hey, that was really good. Or someone will fist bump you and be like, hey, great job, or whatever the heck it is, right? And especially in the remote world too, even harder. And then the higher you get, you're not getting this constant feedback. And you're going to get to a point in the C-suite where you're not going to be messaging the CEO to be like, hey, how do you think that went? He's going to be like, what went? I had 15 other things in between that chat and whatever chat you're talking about. And so sometimes you'll notice senior leaders, they're probably operating from this high functioning fear when suddenly leaders around them are like, why are they like this? This is crazy. Suddenly things change. I was working with a client and they were suddenly in October of last year, the CEO started asking for all of these things. And now there are new expectations. But I don't think anyone took a moment to be like, okay, maybe that CEO is panicking right now. And their high functioning fear is reorganization, redoing all of this stuff, going in all of these directions, etc. And no one has taken a moment, and maybe the CEO doesn't have that emotional availability to be able to take a moment right now to be like, why am I choosing to do what I'm doing right now? Or what is true here? What is really true here? As you said, Grace. And I think even as leaders of on these teams, if we were to ask our leaders this question, our peers, I recognize we're doing all of this activity right now. We take a moment to really understand what is really true here. However we might choose to frame it, I think it can help people snap out of their high functioning fear.
I literally see it every day in the phase that my business is. We're in hyper growth mode. And it's almost like every month. And I would also go so far as to say it's either the CFO or the HR leader's job to ask this question. It really is, right? Mm-hmm. To keep not only your commercial vision on track, but also your human capital plan, right? Because if that changes based on whoever's fear, whoever's panic, right, impacts so many lives, so many lives.
Exactly. And the further up you go, like you say, the less people offer you the truth, the more important it is to have those truth tellers around you and for them to know that they not only have permission, but like part of their job is to give you the truth.
Right.
And like situations like that I'm seeing at the moment, so many companies talking about, should we work from home or should we return to the office? It's what is true here about that conversation. And it might be, there's some truth in terms of we feel like we're disconnected. We feel like we've lost our culture. Or our managers feel like we don't know how to manage anymore. Or we feel like our youngest generation aren't getting that sort of that social networking, that sort of career development time, or whatever the truths are. It's like, what are some of those truths within that conversation? And that would be so much more useful to talk about that rather than, do we do office or do we do working from home?
Grace, we could talk on this for another 5 hours because this is literally, as an HR leader, this conversation makes me insane because it is such a specific to your company conversation. This can't be some peanut butter policy that you're just like, well, that company's doing it, so we should do it too. You're absolutely right. You have to ask yourself the questions. Does it fit into your model? Can you create alternate ways to create connection? For goodness sake, Archita and I we met on a Teams message and we've been besties since. So yes, virtual connection is absolutely possible. It's what is true for you as a business has to be the question. So ladies, I know we could go on and on and on and on. Grace, you are an absolute gem. If I can recommend anything to our audience, please go pick up both of Grace's books. They will help you immensely as a leader, as a coach, as someone trying to design her career path, or even preparing for a pivot. Go get Grace's 2 books. Grace, outside of your books, how can people get a hold of you and what other services do you offer?
So gracemarshall.com will be where you can find me. You can find all my social links from there as well. And you can also grab a taster chapter of each of those books as well. So, maybe we grab the book and then maybe sign up to the newsletter as well. And we can keep in touch that way. But yeah, as well as writing, I do keynote speaking, corporate training, and one-to-one coaching.
Amazing. Well, Grace, it was an absolute pleasure having you. I think Archita and I both got away with some gems to start the week here. So thank you for your presence. We so appreciate you. And to our amazing family, as always, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Until next time.